Welcome back. Hope you're comfy. While you were gone, I made nachos. This is chapter 8 on Orlan, the daughter with no mother, and we'll kind of figure out that quote in a bit. But first, I bet you're asking yourself, why is this stranger who is Orlan on the left transposed right next to our beloved teacher Ceca Cooper? And the answer to that is that there's no actual academic reason whatsoever. I just felt like Ceca looked a little bit like Orlan with those glasses. They are beautiful. All right, moving on. Orlan was born in 1947 in France, and I'm not even going to try and attempt to pronounce her real name. She is very clearly a feminist, and it shows through her work. And she uses video photography, sculpture, and performance as her mediums. In 1978, she had an emergency surgery that would kind of influence or change the trajectory of her artistic career. And we will kind of unpack that in a little bit. She pioneered the form of carnal art, and simply put, it's art that celebrates the grotesque, the quote unquote abnormal, etc., etc. So, speaking of grotesque art, let's talk about her philosophy a little bit. So she believes that people are a multiplicity. So that is to say, people are more than the sum of what we see on the outside, the exterior. Um, she argues that there is a whole side to the human experience that is never really entirely covered at all in art. Um, and she also celebrates technology and science in her works. And she draws her inspiration oftentimes from Western masters, except it's usually in an ironic and satirical fashion. The background of this slide being one such case. So if you look on your right, you will see The Origins of the World, which was painted in 1866 by Gustave. Um, and on the left, you will see Orlan's Origin of War, which was a more recent photo of hers that she did in 2011. So we just have a quick video now. I'm gonna kind of dub over this one because the entire thing is in French and not very conducive to understanding it because of that. So what you'll start to see here is Orlan wearing a cutout of her own naked waist. And she has a slot in her neck for a donation box. And so you can see him putting the donation in right now. And if you're wondering, the money falls down a tube to a collection box in her crotch. Participants put in the donation, and then let's just replay that a second here. So participants put in the donation. That wasn't helpful at all. Participants put in the donation, and during that time, Orlan plays a Baroque era score, and it ends with that loud slot machine bell that we've now heard 3 times. Regarding this kind of dialogue that's happening right now between the cameraman and Orlan, first, the cameraman is asking her about why she's doing the piece, what the piece means. And so she talks a lot about this. This is where we get the early formation of Orlan's kind of feminist influence in her style, and she's talking a lot about those things that we talked about before, about how all of the facets uh, of Western art are limiting and there's this supposed line between what is and isn't art in terms of the nude, and she kind of wants to break that down. And so yeah, and so what's happening now is she is engaging in a dialogue, and this gentleman is actually one of the patrons who does not necessarily agree with the art. And the continuation of this video kind of covers an interview with him and an interview with her. She's like pro Orlan, he's against Orlan, and so it just kind of um, the point is to cover the um, uh, the kind of divisive nature of Orlan's work and the kind of in-your-face sort of style or approach that she's taking in this work and in other works. And so the other piece, or the big piece that the book covered, um, is this kind of series of photos, videos, recordings, etc. Um, and the whole thing is dubbed the reincarnation of Saint Orlan. And you'll notice some religious kind of ties to that, and we'll chat about that in just a second. Um, this umbrella title is given to a series of photos, videos, and what have you, that captures 9 plastic surgeries that she underwent. Now, she stayed awake for each of these surgeries, and during them, she would not only just stay awake, but she would perform music, read poetry, tell stories, all while undergoing the surgeries. Doctors often did it for free for the chance of participating in like the art and also a little bit of the notoriety. And she intentionally made herself less beautiful to counter the cultural norm about what beauty is and our pursuit of it. As consulted, um, she also consulted a psychiatrist and worked on completely changing her personality during this time to completely reinvent herself inside and out. And so part of this too, as we discussed, there's a celebration of medicine and technology and just the advancement of kind of playing God in some sense, being able to alter our form. And so that's where this title comes from, is that celebration. I have a list here in bold. Um, she modeled her face off of very famous art pieces. So we have her head in the Mona Lisa. Um, the nose was modeled after Diana. Europa was the um, mouth, yep. And the chin was Venus, and the eyes were modeled after Psyche, um, because of her crave for love and also order and structure and that sort of thing. So with that, I just kind of wanted to go back a second here. Oh, that's the opposite direction. So here we are back at the beginning again. Kind of disregard Ceca. That was just supposed to be a joke at the beginning. So you can kind of better see all of those different forms. She has kind of these horns, right, on the top of her head. And those are actually, so like we said, that was modeled after the Mona Lisa, probably the most famous example. And those horns were actually implants that are supposed to go into the cheekbones to kind of better define them. Yeah. And so everything you see on this opening photo regarding Orlan is completely different than it would have been, right? And I don't know. I just think I think that's why I chose this photo, is because it's just fascinating to me. Um, yeah, how far surgery has come, and yeah. So we'll go forward now. And this is a more famous, or a more recent, I shouldn't say more famous, a more recent photo, or series of photos by Orlan. Um, it Orlan is dressed in traditional garb, headdresses, and masks from other cultures and ethnicities. And their objective is to celebrate the heritage of marginalized indigenous people and other non-Western art styles. I'm going to read that one more time. Her objective was to celebrate heritages of marginalized indigenous people and other non-Western art styles. And so I have to ask you, when you look at this is a genuine question. Was she successful at that? There's two varying opinions. There's people who say yes, and there's people who say no. The people who say yes would say that she's giving voice to these cultures, who might go completely overlooked in Western art. You know, that we all know that there's a whole element of craft involved, that has been just completely overlooked in the Western art sphere. So there's a lot of people who would support her in this work because of her emphasis, for a lot of those things, a lot of those crafts, and uh, just the different varying ways of seeing ourselves. And then, of course, there are people who say no. They say she falls flat in empathizing, and that her understanding with those she's trying to pay homage to, is just incomplete, and that it's a little bit racist, in fact. Um, and I don't know. Yeah. So, what do you think? Is is she successful with her self hybridization series? And actually, that's most of what I have for you in terms of artwork. Regarding her more recently, she made the news in 2013 and 2016, when she attempted to sue Lady Gaga for $36 million, and accused her of copying her likeness and her concept from a piece, on the left, titled "Woman with a Head," and a few other pieces that were not mentioned. Uh, in the end, she lost in the French courts, and she had to pay the court $18,000 in fees. Um, yeah, and so that is Orlan. She's still, out and about. She's still doing things, and she's got tons of other work, that just didn't quite make it. So this has been chapter 8 on Orlan.